We have quite the Sunday night football game in week 6. The 4-1 Lions head to Arrowhead to play the 2-3 Chiefs. Katie Caldwell, Jeff Lloyd here with you today. Let's break down this matchup. This is such a fun game. So, 4 straight for the Lions. They've put up 161 points in those 4 games. What are you expecting to see in this one?
The one thing that is probably maybe a tad bit of an advantage, maybe for the Kansas City Chiefs, is that the Detroit Lions game doesn't necessarily translate so well outside. Cincinnati last week, notwithstanding, of course. But yeah, I mean, you want to talk about a primetime game. This is what every, network dreams for in
Oh,
a
yeah.
primetime game. Obviously, two explosive offenses. Detroit's defense is certainly, rounding into shape. I think Kansas
Hmm.
City's isn't necessarily there yet. If I'm Detroit, I'm probably you look at what Gibbs has done to this point, and you almost feel like it's a little lacking. Jameer Gibbs has become one of the most potent offensive players in all of the NFL,
Yeah.
and his overall output is probably a little bit less than I think people would believe at this point. David Montgomery is actually has a better rushing yard per average than Jameer Gibbs to this point, and it's kind of different where, Gibbs has kind of become more of the main ball carrier, whereas in the infancy of the two of them playing together, it was more Montgomery was the hammer, and then they brought in the speed in Gibbs. Now
Right.
Gibbs gets more of the carries now, and now they kind of bring in Montgomery when teams are just basically physically exhausted from chasing Gibbs around all day.
Yeah.
And then they kind of get, beat up a little bit, from David Montgomery, who's just a great north-south runner with it. Certainly brings a lot of physicality, with the ball in his hands. So for Detroit going into this game, I think that's something you're probably going to want to make sure you're going to run the ball well. It's
Hmm.
not that Detroit can't get into a scoring matchup with anyone in the NFL, but why would you put yourself into a game of that nature? I mean, Detroit has the better defense, so I think you would cater to your defense in a game like this and try to hopefully, keep Kansas City at bay. But
Hmm.
the one thing I take away from that Monday night game, even though the Chiefs lost, is the Chiefs' offense is rounding back into shape.
I
This will be
agree.
the last week the Chiefs play without Rasheed Rice, but they're really starting to incorporate all their weapons. And for Kansas City, they're actually starting to get a little production running the football,
Hmm.
which just lengthens the amount of time they'll hold on to the ball.
So last year, it felt like every single thing went the Chiefs' way. They were 11 and 0 in one score games last year. They're 0 and 3 this year. The script feels like it has completely flipped. But like you said, when I watch the Chiefs, I don't feel as worried about them as I did 2, 3 weeks ago. It feels like their offense, especially, is really rounding into shape. What do you expect to see from their offense in this one?
I think you just got to continue just working everything. And I think it's the biggest advantage that Chiefs offense kind of has is as we've kind of, moved into this realm where, Travis Kelce is a really good tight end, but he's just not this dominant offensive playmaker anymore. So that actually aids Kansas City because it's not like there's anyone that's necessarily featured more than anyone else.
Mm,
It allows Kansas City to basically and have Patrick Mahomes just eye up the defense and just kind of pick out where he thinks the best, window of opportunity, the best opportunity for success is going to be for him. So it could be Kelsey, it could be Xavier Worthy, it could be audible to the run. Kareem Hunt had a big run last week, a couple of touchdown runs. Isaiah Pacheco is a really, I would say kind of a David Montgomery type,
mm,
the guy that you just don't want to tackle. Like we used to refer to players like that. It was almost like they just had like razor blades in their body. Somehow, some way, you're always seeming to take the blow when you go, normally defense, offense, defense wins. It's just not that way with Pacheco. The high knees, the herky jerkiness and how he runs. He's just a real pain in the butt to actually have to physically get to the ground. And a lot of times Pacheco's first off the ground before the defender. So just keep on, relying on the unknown necessarily if you're
mm,
Kansas City. It's not a feature anymore. You don't have to feature anybody because everybody is capable of doing their job. Everybody is, capable of, performing. They're working in Smith, their rookie, who is a college wide receiver and running back, who is just a really, really interesting talent. This may not be the year where Brashard Smith carries a huge load for the Kansas City Chiefs, but it could be something as the season goes on, they work more and more before they ultimately decide, what type of weapon they want to feature him as going further. but he's just another fun toy at the disposal, of course, of Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. And Patrick Mahomes is once again kind of leaning on his own legs in situations where it's needed. And that's always been something where, he's been smart with that because it's really been able to add Kansas City as far as you get so exhausted into covering everybody and trying to get 4 or 5 people into the pocket. And a lot of times you get the defenses who challenge the pocket, but unfortunately, Patrick Mahomes is no longer there.
Well, he's leading the team in rushing yards, and if I'm the Chiefs, I don't think that's a great thing. That doesn't feel like it's sustainable for the whole season, and you don't want Mahomes taking all those hits if he's running the ball. How do they round out the rest of that run game? Because it feels like it's starting to get there, but I'm not used to seeing Mahomes rush so much.
I kind of agree. Yeah, seeing Patrick probably get, more having to get more involved is probably something Kansas City ultimately does not want. But I think Pacheco, it was a slow start. He certainly seems like he's rounding into shape.
Mhm.
Kareem Hunt is, in my opinion, still defying odds after production out of Kareem Hunt at this point because a few years ago in Cleveland, it looked like there was just no juice left in those legs. Kansas City's given him a little bit of a rebirth. That's why I brought up the name Rashard Smith like I did because he's certainly the fastest running back they have. He's the most athletic, and the question does come up when Rasheed Rice comes back. The guys who are third, fourth, fifth of the wide receiver room now drop 4, 5, 6, and not every one of those guys necessarily has the luxury that they can go perform somewhere else, where Brashard Smith can maybe become a little bit more of a factor as a true running back, getting the ball out of, standard operational handoff types of things or toss plays. So that might be something you're looking for Kansas City is to start to incorporate Brashard Smith into the running game
Mm.
just because he brings juice that room just doesn't currently have.
Quick pause. If you haven't subscribed to the BetCanada YouTube channel, you can do so below. It's free and it helps support our channel so we can keep bringing you NFL and NHL content. Now, back to the show. When I look at the Lions, God, they're just so fun to watch. They look so complete. One thing that does worry me about them is they're starting to get pretty banged up, especially in that secondary. How worried are you of the Lions and with the banged up secondary? Because man, when you're playing Patrick Mahomes, like you have to think he can break out.
We kinda did this last year, though, with Detroit. There was a revolving door. They were the ones that
That's
got Jamal
true.
Adams back into the NFL. Um, there's safeties between, Battle and Joseph, and I know it was said during the game, Sunday during Cincinnati, they're probably the best safety duo in the NFL, and
Mm.
I do kinda highly agree with that because I think Battle kinda does everything, plays against the line of scrimmage, can cover tight ends and backs, and Kirby Joseph, even though the reputation is probably, it's warranted, for being a little bit dirty, but, people don't realize that he just basically is a pure interceptor of the football, which is kind of rare in the NFL nowadays because most of your safeties nowadays are, guys who couldn't cut it at corner. So they took their ball skills and put them at safety, where Joseph was, came out of college as a, guy with a reputation as a ball hawking safety. And it certainly translated well into the NFL. So, because I think with their corners, the premise is we just want to make sure that we can do enough to keep them in front of the safeties, and our safeties can
Right.
make plays. So I think that's probably nothing's going to change. And certainly, if you are losing guys at the cornerback position, that is probably the game plan you would go to anyway. Is hey, just do the best you can, beat him up for 5 yards, stay between him and the ball, and obviously we have safeties over the top for help, and certainly we have a great pass rush. Hopefully that can aid any of that and basically cover any missteps that may come from that. I'm not really it's really hard when you talk about Detroit to find an area of concern right now,
That's the
um,
thing.
because
Yeah.
you think about how banged up they were last year, and everybody still had them favorites to go to the NFC Championship game.
Yeah.
Certainly, Washington had a different idea, but Detroit just finds a way to basically just plug every hole. They definitely have the flex seal, the flex tape approach, and it works for them very, very well.
Who do you have winning this one? I think even with the Chiefs looking so much more like themselves, my gut still says the Lions. God, they're just so fun to watch right now.
For me, I'm not really sure how Kansas City does win this because I just think their defense is just not there right now.
Okay.
And that's normally a storyline with Kansas City every year is the defense. And then all of a sudden, they go out, they make a move or two and kind of just plug in something. And it's never really a huge move. It's basically just getting another body, getting more depth in there,
Mhm.
so they don't hurt the rotation when, somebody, unfortunately, does miss some time. They're usually pretty smart and diligent about that. But, Detroit right now is a team that basically is gonna drop 30 on you and most likely is not gonna allow you to score 20. It's really hard to believe that there's a team right now, that really matches up truly one-on-one with Detroit. And one of the thing when you are talking about the Lions is this is a team that should be highly motivated based of last year. 2 years ago, it
Mm.
was the NFC Championship game. Last year, the road went through Detroit until it didn't. So you have to think that's gotta be something where Detroit's like, "You know what? We maybe missed our window last year. We're certainly not gonna miss our window this year."